Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for the podcast Magic is Real, hosted by me, Shannon Torrance. I am a psychic medium, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual with a focus on near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences. And we also now are talking a lot about spiritual healing. And so I'm very happy to have with me today from Sydney, Australia, Allura Hollowell. Let me tell you about Allura before she and I begin to speak, and I'll have her talk about what she does. According to her bio, she's a consciousness mentor and transformational guide whose radical awakening in 2018 catapulted her into a lifelong mission, helping others reconnect with the truth of who they are. Formerly a stay-at-home mother of three, Allura's life changed forever after a spontaneous out-of-body experience at a meditation retreat left her seeing the energetic fabric of reality. This experience dissolved her former identity and birthed a new purpose to guide others to profound reconnection, which she does now through her signature modality, the consciousness method. Welcome, Allura. Thank you so much for joining me from Australia.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. I'm honored to be here and I'm
I'm
so excited for this discussion.
So, me too. I'm so honored to have you here. I'd like to start by talking about your spiritual awakening and what your former spiritual beliefs may have been. Anything as it pertains to your spiritual journey. Were you raised with spirituality, not with spirituality? Obviously, your spiritual awakening, or at least this moment, happened during meditation. So, obviously, you were a seeker already, but I'd love to hear a bit about you personally.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I think I was born a sensitive human. I know I was born a sensitive human, like a lot of us. So, very emotionally sensitive, attuned to the awareness that I felt a little bit uncomfortable in myself growing up. I felt a little bit aware of the pain that was within myself and around me. But I was very much sort of floating in a space where I wasn't grounded into in a spiritual practice or in a spiritual family by any means. So I was aware of myself, but I wasn't ever actualized in a spiritual experience or connection as a child and teenager and growing up. In fact, I think I was more in a survival mode from my younger years. And I think that survival mode was just ticking along under the surface. You know, there was these things that happened, like they all do for all of us in our younger years, that informed me and drove me into patterns and loops. And I was pretty unconscious in all of that, to be honest. And I was very driven from what I now call the unloved wound to create a family, to get married, to have the kind of stereotypical life in some ways of, I've got three kids, the house, the three kids, the husband, the holidays, the things. That was what was sort of a motivator for me because that's what I knew from that template. So I'm very grateful for the experience to have been able to have these three beautiful children and to have been married. But it was more just on a survival mode level. There wasn't a lot going on much deeper than that. When my kids were little, in 2018, 4, 6, and 8, I was really burnt out, to be honest. I'd been exhausted by trying to be a really involved mother because I really wanted to be doing that job really well, but found myself really depleted in that mothering process. And with a husband that was very dysregulated in himself and not really on a awakening journey, so very much trapped in his own patterns. So I actually went on the meditation retreat because all my girlfriends were going, and they called me and they said, "Hey, do you want to come with us?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, that sounds like a holiday." Maybe I'll just go along and be able to have a break and relax and learn some new tools. But what I didn't realize was that my soul was calling me pretty strongly into that space. And what happened there has completely transformed my whole existence.
So well, succinctly said and beautifully said. I am a nanny. I've been a nanny for almost my whole life, and partly that's why I decided never to have children. Not because I don't love them, I absolutely do. I just know how exhausting it is, and I know that as a sensitive person, I need a lot of me time, personal space, self care, and 9 hours of solid sleep a night. So I can understand that. And I'm sure that's very relatable to many. So let's talk about what happened on that meditation retreat.
Yeah. So arriving there, I distinctly felt a very powerful energy. It was on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. And I was like, wow, there's something going on here that I haven't felt before. And as I sort of deepened into that space and began to meditate, I could feel things were cracking open within me. And it was happening very, very radically and very, very vastly and quickly. And I was beginning to connect to something greater than myself. But it was probably on the fourth day that we were invited to go down to the beach to meditate. And I could feel there was something going on that wasn't quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I walked down onto the beach. It was a beautiful blue sky day. And all of a sudden, I felt this really heaviness in my body. And I could just feel my body was becoming cement. So from my ankles up, every cell of me was becoming heavier and heavier and heavier. And it was like I was just being magnetized and pulled to the ground. So I surrendered. I was like, okay, I'll just lie down on the beach and I'll just have a rest. And then as I lay down, I felt a new energy come through whereby I could sense my consciousness was coming up through the body from the soles of my feet, up my legs, up my torso, past my heart, up to my mind. And then all of a sudden, my complete consciousness separated from my body. And I could see my body lying on the ground. And I was beyond my body as consciousness. And then my consciousness began to lift and expand. And then I was going higher and higher until I dissolved into the brightest, whitest light. And this pure, pure light, like a gateway or a portal, basically enveloped my whole being, my whole consciousness. And from there, I merged into the pure darkness. And this darkness, as soon as my consciousness touched the darkness, it was like completely coming home in a way I can't even express, because it was a completion, a wholeness, an arrival that was so natural and so vast and so ineffable, really, that I just could feel my consciousness expanding infinitely and eternally through this vastness. And I was like, oh my goodness. But then from that point, I merged pretty completely into that vastness, into that consciousness. So my awareness of me as an individual began to dissolve as I returned home into that space.
That's so cool. I want to know, do you have any idea why you had that experience? Was it because y your guides or your higher self decided to show just decided to show you that because you had a greater purpose to teach others? Or was it because of something you did while you were on that retreat, like the brain waves you were in, the state of mind? What do you think now?
Now, well, at first, it was a massive disruption to my whole existence. And so I think there was some catalyst in the space, but I now see that my soul wanted this journey and was completely committed to this journey. And I can see all the pieces that I've gathered through my life that now support this journey. And I can see the truth and the authenticity of myself in this version of me. So I think a small combination, but to sustain that level of shift, it was definitely from my soul.
Yeah, that feels right to me too. So at this time, I'm assuming you are with other people when this happens and you're in meditation. How does it feel in terms of, does it feel like you completely just left everybody And yet your body's still intact. I ask this because I've interviewed people who've had out of body experiences as opposed to what we call near death experiences or death experiences. So your body's still there and functioning, and yet your soul is having this completely different experience. How did you feel after you, or if you remember coming back into the body? And did you just want to tell everybody, or were you too stunned to even speak? I just want to know what the emotional experience of that was, and even how it kind of shook you for
Yeah.
however long it shook you. Whether it's an
Yeah.
hour or a day or a week or whatever.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah.
So that space is really interesting to me because afterwards I had to go back and assess because it felt like a near-death experience without any bodily trauma. So my body was very still on the beach, like I was sleeping. So no one was particularly concerned about me, but it had come right down to a baseline where it was just in deep rest and I'd completely left. So what happened, I was out for about an hour and a half. Eventually, my consciousness separated from the all. When I actually touched the frequency of unconditional love, it split me from source into this dimension again, which I found so profound, and it anchored in me a huge awareness that the separation we experience here from the divine, from source, from the all, is facilitated by that frequency of unconditional love, which allows us to experience ourself and consciousness. So that was my first teaching because I was like, why did I come back? Why didn't I stay there? And when I was shown that love, I was like, whoa, the vastness of that was so profound that it was defined and clear that to come back and to be here is the most loving space for our evolution and our realization of ourselves and consciousness. So that caused me to drop down, and I don't know how, but my consciousness found that body on the beach. I opened my eyes and I could only see energy. So every particle of the sky, the sea, the sand, humans, everyone was vibrating. And kind of a little bit like that Avatar, where you look at things, that movie where you look at things and everything's shimmering. I would look at a leaf and I could see all the particles of the leaf moving. It was just extraordinary and very overwhelming because nothing was physical anymore. Everything had become energetic in reflection of the energy that I'd become internally. So that was the first thing that happened. And that lasted a considerable period of time, like a couple of months, where everything was just shimmering like energy. The second thing that happened was that my body had tapped into some energy source, and I didn't realize at the time, but I now know it as a Kundalini force or an energetic force that's connected to this dimension. So my body started to vibrate continually, and it would vibrate constantly almost. And then at different points, it would almost seizure because the body was reorientating to this energetic dimension. And that energy, even though it's brutal, and for those that have gone through a Kundalini awakening, you'll know how intensive that is for the body. But simultaneously, it was completely connecting me to a new level of energetic capacity within myself. And it would move me away from things that I wasn't meant to be with and or around or doing, and then it would bring me closer to other things. I couldn't drive because I was vibrating too much, so it was a big deal. I couldn't. Yeah, I'd go out to a cafe and I'd be under the table vibrating. People would want to call ambulances, but I knew it was the divine working through my energetic body. It was extreme, but it was it was a lot to get my head around. And the final piece in that was that I didn't know who I was. So I looked in the mirror. I got helped off the beach. I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, and I don't know why we're here. So I'd had a complete amnesia experience from that break in the consciousness of being here. So I sat down to breakfast with people that looked vaguely familiar, which were my long-term friends. And I got some things off the buffet and I started eating, and they're like, Allura, what are you doing? And I was like, eating, I think. I don't know what I was supposed to do. And they're like, you don't eat meat. You've been vegetarian since you were 11. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to eat this. So I didn't have preference. I wasn't sure about what my identity preference was. There wasn't any choice that I was Like, this is what you're supposed to make. And that carried through. I came back home. My husband looked at me and he's like, I don't know who you are. You look like an alien. I'm sorry. I don't know who I am. I don't know why we're in this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I had to learn to remother again from another level of energy because I couldn't feel the connection. It was a complete disruption of my existence. So that integration, and just rest assured for everyone listening, my children are very, very connected to me now. We have a whole new level of relationship and love, and they're absolutely aligned and connected with me and safe, and went through that awakening with me, came out the other side really divinely. My ex-husband and I have split up. He's now having a baby. He's come through that trauma. But just so everyone knows the end of the story, it all kind of came around. But there was a lot of work to do to get me back and to realign my whole reality to the new level of energy and being that I had been initiated into.
Did people think that you were having a psychological event, like a
Yeah.
psychiatric event, I mean?
My mum warned me like I died. So there was that. There was that part that was like, wow, she's completely different, you know? I don't know who she is. And I was very internal because I was so radically connected to the source of everything. Yet I'd come back into a body where I had a nervous system, I had emotional density and cellular memory in my cells. I had a fixed physical three-dimensional reality that I'd created prior to this experience. So there was massive amounts of integration, which I know was my initiation because there was no one that could help me and no one could understand. But I was so connected to the divine aspect of me that I knew I was safe and I knew I had to step this out. It took about 3 years to reorientate me into being connected and being able to function in a way that was of service, and also realigning the reality around me. But I knew that I was just going to these places and layers that I needed to go to. And it did look from the outside like I'd shut down, like people couldn't reach me. But whilst this was happening, I was having the whole list of mystical experiences. You know, I was ticking them off left, right,
That's,
and
I'd
center.
love to hear about that. Well, yeah, I have so many questions, and we are going to get obviously to the work you do now as a result.
Yeah,
It's just that
please.
all of this is so profound. As you're remembering who you are as a soul while forgetting who you are or who you have been as a human. And I think that's so interesting. So I would, if you can sort of describe, I know that you visually were seeing. I just interviewed Tom Matt, who is someone who had an event you could call it was actually for him a psychotic psychosis. However, he's not mentally ill, but it was triggered by drug use, and he now, to this day, 12 years later, still can see the matrix. So he can see holograms everywhere. He doesn't even know what it all means. He just knows that he can see beyond what's physically in front of most of us. So he can see sort of past the veil, through the veil, if you will. So, yeah, can you explain a bit about what kinds of experiences you were having? And I assume, were you having mediumistic? I asked that as a medium. Were you hearing messages from spirit and that sort of thing? Was it sort of a Joan of Arc situation? Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of guidance, beyond what would I would be able to formulate within myself, and a lot of revealing and showing. So I came into this place where my body was anchored in the 3D, but I was able to see how it was anchored and what anchored it and what caused the degree of separation that I believe humans have from themselves. So I was able to see how reality was structured, how we initiate into this experience, and what happens around us and through us to create the experience we have, and especially the limitation of the experience. Because I was really fascinated. I was like, I know myself as a divine being, I know myself as the purity of love, knowingness. ultimate like worth and value as a part of this consciousness experience, how come that is not the lived experience in the density? How come that there's a gap there? So my mission and what I was kept being shown was the processes and the aspects of closing that gap between the human and the divine, between the limited version and the expanded version. And it kept showing me how it all programs out to get us the pathway through. So in terms of the mystical experiences, I developed a unique relationship with time and space whereby I could speed up or slow down time at will. If I wanted more time, I could create the expression of more time. It was all just from my own perceptual access. So I could make things happen really fast, or I could like lengthen them out. So time dilation and slowing down. I could bend reality. So I would see something that was coming that I didn't want to have happen. So I would reframe that from the inside out and be able to vision the other alternative spontaneously, and it just reflected. It wasn't even like there was an impact to be like, I want this to happen. It will look like this. It was like, that's not happening. This is happening. And reality would bend. One time I was with a girlfriend and she was driving late at night and I was not driving because I was vibrating in the seat. But she's like, oh, Allura, there's a breathalyzer test up here. I don't know if I've had a bit too much. And I was like, no problem. And they waved the car in front in. We drove through and they waved the car behind in. And she was like, thank you so much. I was like, no problem, let's go home. And it was like things like that, avoiding car accidents, like that, I was with someone in a car and we could see that this truck was about to sideswipe us. I could see it. And I just was like, okay, we're bending around that. And it was this close. Things like that were happening all the time and on small levels as well. Simultaneously, I was living a multi-dimensional experience. So I was witnessing the version of me here, but I was witnessing the versions of me through all space and time. So I was working with all the versions and seeing the shift that happens here impacts all space and time. So I suppose like past lives, but past imprints of my energy and my design pattern, I was working to shift the design pattern here and watching how that was shifting every version through all space and time. So that was pretty profound. Like I'd close my eyes and I'd see another version. I'd like, okay, what do we need to do here? So that was huge. I dimensionalized objects. I was working with a woman in Texas. She broke a glass in her kitchen. The next day, a shard of glass arrived in my kitchen floor and actually went through my foot. And I was like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? And it was actually one of the core points where I began to access an important part of my work called the pain portal. It was a dimensional access, so I went through that. What else? A lot of like access to other alternate dimensions, experiencing our friends out there, having relationships with, other aspects of me reflected in, you know, extraterrestrial or like star races, the Galactic Council, met them all. It was a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
And
Shannon. It was a
please
lot. I could
don't
go
be.
on. It was
I
things
live
like
for
that.
this. No, thank you. I live for this. My brain is just like, it's all yes, validating what I already know, what I already believe. It's very affirming to hear it from someone as, I don't want to say normal, I guess, but like, as you seem to be a very rational person and a very sort of traditional person in a lot of ways. And so that's what I really like to have on my podcast is people who are very grounded and authentic, who are everyday people having extraordinary experiences, because I am now finding out that all of this is very real. That's why this podcast is called Magic is Real, because I am learning that all of it sounds fantastical, but it really isn't. And so, and I have chills about that. Very, very strong spirit energy right now as I say that this is something that they do want us to share. And because they want us to know that there's so much more happening than what we see, and to also escape from that matrix of fear that's perpetuating more fear, and that's perpetuating division and hate and violence and stress and anxiety. And really, we can work with all these different dimensions and all these different aspects of ourselves. And that past lives are not past lives, they are just different expressions of ourselves happening everything, everywhere, all at once. Did you see that movie?
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
I can't remember it very well, but it
Yeah,
was pretty accurate.
it's pretty accurate, I think. Yeah.
We are infinite and eternal,
Yeah.
so we're everywhere all the time. But that actually was an interesting journey for me because when the veil was lifted and I was very honored and grateful to see it all, something happened after 3 years of seeing it all, whereby a switch flicked. And I was like, I could do this for the rest of my life. I could
Yeah.
spend my whole existence journeying through all space and time. But what really became clear was that the real truth work, the real honest work that I signed up for is right here, right now, in this reality. So, what's happened is I've collapsed all of those experiences to honor and to work out really how to align to a truthful reality experience here. And using reality as a mirror for all of those aspects that you mentioned before, the fear, the hate, the whatever that's going on around us, to become the center point of the transformation, integration, and realization of ourselves beyond those fractal spaces that get mirrored back to us. So becoming the template of our own wholeness and our own truthful projection, which means we define and design reality as creators, which means everything that's outside of you is simply a mirror to where we need to do that inner work to release the density that's holding that version of reality in place. So, where I came to and why I don't really speak about the mystical as much anymore is because it's critical to understand how vast we are, but the anchoring here is where we get to live like it's heaven on earth because we realize ourselves as being free from those things that have created coercion, domination, control, limitation, density, trapped illusion, all that stuff we can do here right now.
That is so cool and beautiful. That is the thing. We are here for a reason. And it's so easy to spiritually bypass a lot of the things that are happen. I'm guilty of it a lot. It is actually my spirituality is the reason why I have been able to tame anxiety, tame fear. And I also recognize that it is important to be present here and now, and that what is happening right now is, even though I do believe, as I have tattooed on my arm, that life is but a dream, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it's just a hallucination and you can just wipe it away. It is a very carefully orchestrated stage play where we are playing these characters for a reason. And also, the characters around us are part of our soul family, I believe. I'd love to hear your take on this, but feel free to add or, um, whatever doesn't resonate or does. But I believe that we're all these blobs of light and we're going to play these roles because this is what your soul needs to learn, or how we're going to grow from this. So I've chills about that as well. It's as much as it is fun to play in the fifth dimension, or in the 5D. It is so fun to hang out there and talk to spirits and spirit guides and angels and meditate and kind of envision all these amazing things. We do have to be here. And not that this world isn't also entirely beautiful. There's so much exciting stuff happening here. And there's a lot of really hard, really tough, really emotionally challenging stuff. So now I would love to talk with you about what it is that you do with people to support them in their human journey.
Yeah, so beautiful. So for me, there are multiple portals of self-realization that have almost been distorted and guarded, and uh, especially I find in the spiritual world, um, how to express it, they've been protected in such a way that they've created limitation for us. And those portals for me are the portals of pain and the portals of fear and the portals of illusion. So, particularly with pain, what I came to understand is that the only thing all humans truly fear is their own pain. So, the impact of everything around us and our avoidance of everything around us is just because we don't want to feel the pain that we believe will be associated with something happening. So, what is probably the most fundamental aspect of my work is completely reconfiguring the relationship to pain. Because once you know pain as the true liberator, as the true force of you actually becoming whole and realizing self, because you collapse separation, you collapse fear, you collapse illusion and limitation, your internal relationship with pain is the most expansive experience you can have. And I see it every single day with the people doing the work that I offer, that they stretch their nervous system beyond the fear that they've experienced around that pain to collapse inward, to actually experience the truth of that pain, holding themselves so thoroughly in consciousness. And it feels like you're going to die because the limited part of yourself does not want you touching that pain. Because the second that pain becomes completely metabolized within your system, you have nothing to fear. And the ongoing work for us as humans is to get safer and safer and safer internally with our pain. So there's nothing external that we need to fear. And from that place, we realize the creatorship that we have. And it's not manifestation and it's not trying to get things, it's being free. It's being free internally to step through everything in our existence without avoidance, without trying to manipulate it, without trying to control it, without trying to make it better or different, because we're safe within. And then we project from there. So from that space, there's so much that we can do to transform the fabric of reality. And as a consciousness, I believe that our truest relationship, why we're really here, is to have a relationship with consciousness. Because we've split from the all to be individual streams of consciousness, to know ourselves as consciousness, to know ourselves as the all. So when we begin to develop that internal relationship so profoundly and deeply, that's where the focus stays. And that's where we allow all things to be potentials and possibilities in our lives. And we realize ourselves as the divine beings we are. So the pain as a portal, the relationship to consciousness, and then from there, there's 12 processes that go through how reality is constructed and unhook us from that matrix of being limited and trapped into being a victim to reality on some level and aligning us to the creatorship. And that's, in a nutshell, the work that we do.
I really appreciate that term, being a victim of reality. What does that look like for people? What kinds of people come to you for help?
Yeah, it's usually the sensitive ones that have journeyed through multiple modalities, that have tried multiple things and gone, I know I'm here to experience and realize this and embody this, but there's almost like a gap between all the things I know and the being I know I am and the truth of it and the lived embodied experience of it. So the people that want to do this work are the ones that are aware, they're conscious, they've already looked at their patterns, they're already on the journey, and they're like, where is the missing piece to orientate me into myself so completely that I feel safe in this dimension, safe within myself, safe to create. And those are the ones that are here for the big mission as well, like the mission to orientate themselves into this truth, because everyone has a unique stream of consciousness that they're here to express. They're here to become the whole of that alive universal being that is all of us in our connection to ourself, in our wholeness, in our connection to each other. So it's really the ones that are like, where is that missing piece? I don't know how to get from the knowledge to the embodiment of the truth of this experience.
Hmm. And how do you help them get there? Is it wisdom and insight that you've gained? Do you tap in intuitively? Is it all of it?
Yeah, it's a really amazing journey because it's a stream of consciousness. It's not me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just a vessel.
Hmm.
I'm not the consciousness, but it's almost like this consciousness of this liberation and this connection and this processing of reality to free ourselves is available to every human, right? Every single human has it. I'm just reflecting that everyone has it and everyone can access it for themselves. So I'm all about everyone's sovereignty in finding their own connection to the consciousness. And the way I facilitate that is I work with people over 6 months in a container where they access the content that gives them the steps. And then I work with them in real time on a week, like weekly calls. We've got 5 calls a week where you can drop in every day if you need
Oh,
to.
that's nice.
Yeah, and share and receive and be in the community of people doing this work. And then from there, what happens is I'm really like a mirror back to the place where you're limiting, avoiding, or resisting the truth of what's going on for you. And we find that sweet spot where you're like, I don't want to go there. And I guide you safely to go where you don't want to go. And then you liberate more of yourself and more of your energy. And then we keep moving forward. So my role is a reflector of your consciousness. The content and the processes and the internal work is the pathway that you initiate for yourself. Because after the 6 months, I want you feeling like you're a sovereign divine being that has this understanding about how reality works, but you also have more access to your unique stream that you're here to gift to humanity. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for client, I know there's client confidentiality, so you can't share specifics necessarily, but are there people that have come forward with testimonials that you can share, not to prove, just for inspiration?
Oh,
I'd love to know. I mean, whatever
I
you're
have a whole
comfortable
podcast.
sharing.
No, it's fine. I
Yeah,
have a whole podcast.
perfect.
Literally, the humans that do this work are so devoted and so divinely connected to it that they are happy to share. And
That's
I
great.
have goosebumps because I love every human that dedicates themselves to the consciousness. It's not
Yeah.
me, it's the consciousness, right? I'm here to express a consciousness. So I have a podcast called the Consciousness Method Podcast where beautiful humans come on that have done the work and they share their story, they share what happened for them. It can be, as you know, I was speaking, did an interview yesterday, and the man, the dad, he was like, I no longer shout at my kids. I no longer have any negative response because I see the truth of their reflection. I see the truth of my system. I understand how we're coding this reality. I no longer need to shout. There's other open, the consciousness is opened. I have other ways to be in this. And that's just a small example. I
Yeah.
mean, I have people coming off medication because they access the intelligence of their body and the truth of their experience. I have people completely rekindling marriages, relationships to parents, children that they have just blocked and gone, I can't do that. We've completely opened that up to whole new levels of experience. Some people have left relationships where they know they can't be, but have stayed in them for decades, and we've activated into that. People have come into the truth of their purpose and realized themselves and now expressing to the world. It's like, in terms of the result, it's interesting because it's not, in the end, everyone doesn't really care about having the thriving business, having the perfect relationship, having the perfect body, all those things. Everyone cares about the relationship to consciousness and their liberation, which means they get all those things by default. They all just arrive. And when you have them all, you're like, awesome. What's next to process or be connected to or evolve within myself? And everything becomes evolution. nothing becomes fixed that this thing is going to make me feel better or safe or okay or that I've arrived. So it's just a flip of that script. You become what you want.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear the podcast. I would also like to know some generally how, apart from things like doing your program and that, generally, how do we connect with consciousness? What does it really mean to connect with consciousness? Because does it mean meditation? Does it mean prayer? Does it mean awareness? Um, how do we know we're really connected? How do we know we're fully connected, etc.?
Yeah. So consciousness is a real, excuse me, a real time experience that is happening right now. And I think the starting point is to realize when you fall into unconsciousness.
Mm,
So when you go into autopilot, so when you're in a default mode in your life, it's like I'm responding the same as I've always responded. I'm triggering the same. Acting the same. I'm feeling the same pain. I'm looping in the same pattern, different people, different time, different scenario, but same patterning. And when you arrive more consciously in the truth of your reality, and you begin to see and go, oh, wow, I've been asleep in that. I've been neglecting that because it's just been easier to survive that than be really aware of my involvement in that pattern. That I would say is step one for people.
yeah.
Because from that step, you can see where you're unconscious in your existence. And that by default breeds more and more consciousness, which means you're connecting more and more to yourself. And I feel passionately that this potentially is the missing link in the healing space, that we work so hard on our connection, but we miss how we're showing up on the daily, how we are in relationships, how we are to the person at the checkout, how we are with our family. You know, I meet so many people that are doing such beautiful work, but there's still these densities that are like playing out in our experience. And from that density, there's still separation occurring. Separation from the consciousness, separation from the truth, separation from our pain. So for me, it's a real time engagement about where you are unconscious in your waking life. And from there, you can expand all the other places as well. And of course, there's processes and awarenesses that come through from that. And I have a lot of internal processes, right? Guided processes. I wouldn't call them meditations, but internal processes where you're actively connecting to consciousness.
Mm, yeah, thank you. That's really, really clear. I understand that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Sometimes it's not even so much being conscious as catching yourself when you're being unconscious. I think it's, which is what presence is, which is what the power of now is, which is what checking in with yourself is, which I think is a really great practice anyway, of noticing your responses, noticing your reactions, taking time to remember, okay, wait, this thing is happening. I'm feeling triggered, for example, feeling triggered by something, for example. Let's kind of center ourselves for a second here. What is triggering me? If it's hysterical, it's historical. What is this? I do this with myself. What is this really about? And there's a really great exercise that I've recently heard of where when you're trying to sort through a problem, you sort of say, okay, here's what's happening. And then asking why. Like, this is how I'm relating to this person. Why? Because this. Okay, but why? Because this. And why that? And why that? Until you kind of get to, okay, I see. Let's kind of get into like the, I almost imagine it like a circles and circle within a circle within a circle within a circle within a circle until you get to the core where you start to see, okay, this is what this is really about and what it is for me, maybe spiritually, psychologically, what needs to be, it kind of helps you get down to what needs to be healed here. Because typically, a response to something that somebody else did or an external event, unless it's an obviously traumatic situation, is really not about the person or the thing. It's about how it makes you feel and what it's bringing up for you.
Absolutely, I could not agree more, which is why I've just written a book that's coming out in 2 weeks.
Oh, yay.
Called, yeah, unloved, unworthy, unknown, which are the three core wounds of humanity that are the foundational aspects of why we separate from ourselves and want to survive our external experience, and why we keep being triggered into the same patterns, and what is beneath that. So those energetic patterns of being outside and going, how can I make this different? Or how can I survive this? Or how can this be okay for me? They're so deeply intertwined with our humanity, and every single human has a version of feeling unloved, unworthy, and unknown. So the book is designed to absolutely touch in on those spaces where you have increasing consciousness, and then what to do when you realize those wounds.
Wow. Where will we be able to get that book? Is it readily
Yeah.
available on Amazon
Yep,
or,
it's going to
yeah.
be on Amazon and Book Vault, and available via Allura Halliwell, my site.
Okay,
So
good. Yes, of
you'll
course
be
we
able
can
to
go to your
find it.
site as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was it that inspired you specifically to write that book?
So when I came back and I began to see the fabric of reality, it became really clear to me that there are these three core patterns of energetic abandonment of ourselves, of leaving ourselves to try to find the external experience of that. And it's so pervasive and it's so deep within all of us. And all of us on some level think, well, we have a problem, or we're broken, or we can't get through this, or there's something wrong that we can't transcend this. But I just, I suppose, offer what that patterning and what that design function is here to do for our awakening, and how to transverse that, as opposed to again feeling a victim to those wounds. So it's more of a journey into understanding more of our relationship to reality and ourselves via those patterns.
Yeah, on a similar note, I was just on a podcast, Third Eye Phone, which is going to be coming out soon, where I was interviewed about my sex and love addiction recovery. And one of the things I believe is that all addictions come from one addiction or one source, which is, I think that love addiction is really the source, the core of all addictions. So I don't care if it's sex, if it's money, if it's drugs, if it's alcohol, if it's eating, it all comes from a lack of self-love, or a lack of a feeling of not being loved, a feeling of not being, as you said, known, a feeling of seeking to find wholeness outside of ourselves. So really, it's what they call in the 12-step program a God-sized hole. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be religious. It doesn't mean, God can be the God of your understanding, God representing uh, who we really are, what our spirit is made of, and how we connect with that. The consciousness is what you're talking about, and that connection with consciousness. Because, of course, as humans, we also do need human connection, and that is proven in those studies with baby monkeys, where if they don't get affection and love, they're going to have attachment, reactive attachment disorders or whatever. Like we are built to connect. We are built for affection and love and comfort. And also, we also have to learn to be able to self-soothe and not rely on other people or or even a job or work to make ourselves feel safe and whole, which sounds like that's what you're doing too, is like you said, helping your clients feel safe, secure, peace, I would say at peace, despite or in spite of things that are happening externally.
Absolutely. And it's such a radical journey inwards to the relationship with self. Because I think the question is, when we are aware that something is missing, so when we feel that sense of, oh, I'm not validated, or I might not be enough, or that person might not love me, or I feel disconnected, or I don't really understand why I'm not being heard, seen, felt in the way I want to be received, we only know that that's not there because the truth of us is that we are. We are innately, organically loved, like love and loved, where we organically have connection to consciousness, so we know ourselves. We are organically enough because we're here in this physical form, which validates our existence, that of course we're enough to be expressing as consciousness in this way. So the gap between looking outside of ourselves and going, why isn't that there? And then we become addictive in the sense of surviving. It's like the more and more I look to try and activate that experience outside of myself, the less I have to feel the pain of the absence of that experience within myself. But paradoxically, it's feeling the pain of the absence within yourself, which is the greatest connector to yourself, which means all addictions dissolve. And I've seen this time and time again with my work. The addiction dissolves once you find the core of the pain that is holding that addiction as the survival mode or separation mode to yourself. So, working with addiction is week one, like realizing where your addiction is, reclaiming your energy from the addiction, truly processing the pain that lies below that addiction to release that structure in the reality. And from there, the consciousness shifts, and you no longer need to lean into that to create external safety, which is actually an illusion of safety. Nothing outside of you can make you safe. True safety is within. Because you can be in the safest relationship or the best paying job or whatever, have 1,000 followers, like millions of followers on social media, but you can still feel unloved, unworthy, and unknown. You can still feel all those feelings inside because it's not safe within you. The template's not safe. So, realizing that your template is the predictor of your external reality means you want to work on making that safe.
Very well said. Is there anything else that, well, there are two things. One, I'd like to hear about anything you have coming up. Besides, you've got your book coming out, which we're talking about. Uh, your website is just your name, isn't it? Is it
Yeah.
Allura Hollowell, which I will have in the description notes. But if somebody is visually impaired, it's ALLURAHALLIWELL. Did I get that right?
Yes.
.com.
Perfect.
And so is there anything else? I know you're also planning a retreat, which you don't have specifics on yet, but this will be in my city of Los Angeles, which is really exciting. But anything that you want to share about what is coming up for you?
Yeah, so we're going to be beginning the 6 month mentorship in January, and that's open for anyone to join who's interested in that. So you could just send me a message any place via connect at Allura Halliwell or on Instagram, Facebook, via the site. Just let me know that you might be interested, and we can have a chat, or I can send you more information. And that's happening, yeah, for the, beginning then for 6 months. And then we're going to hopefully be over in LA in September for a retreat. And then from there, there'll be other retreats happening kind of around the world. So you'll be able to jump in on one of those if it's close to you. But until then, listening to the Consciousness Method podcast will give you a bit of an insight. And on there are at least 6 masterclasses around parenting, around pain, around dying to the limited self, around the wounds. So you can begin to get to know my work and feel if there's any resonance, which I think is important.
Thank you. And in summation, if off the top of your head, if there's one thing that you want people to know, if you were leaving today and you had to leave parting words, what would you say to people? What do you want people to know?
That you are so much freer than you might realize, and that the potential and possibility of living a connected, whole, loved, safe, realized life is actually here. You don't have to keep seeking.
Thank you so much, Allura Hollowell. This has been so inspiring to me, and I trust that it will be to my listeners as well. So just want to thank you so much. You're a busy mother and a career person as well. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your energy and your insight with me and my listeners. And listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, please will you do me a favor and just like, comment, even if it's just a little heart below. It really helps get the word out there that this podcast exists. It gets the word out about my guest, Allura, and appreciate all who have done that so far. And even just appreciate people listening, even if you don't take the time to do that or have the time to do that. That is okay. We're just happy that you're here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.